What if I told you the modern world of money, the stock market, corporate power, global trade, and even inflation itself was all shaped by one company? Not a country, not a king. A company so wealthy, so powerful, so terrifyingly influential, that at its peak, it was worth more than Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and Google combined. This is the story of the VOC, the Dutch East India Company, the first mega corporation in history, and the shocking financial secrets it left behind. Secrets we are still repeating, ignoring, or suffering from today. To understand the rise of the VOC, we need to go back to a world before capitalism existed. Europe was hungry, not for land, but for spices. Nutmeg, cloves, pepper, tiny things worth more than gold. But getting them meant crossing oceans filled with pirates, storms, shipwrecks, and disease. Each voyage was a gamble. 9 out of 10 ships never returned. So, investors, merchants, nobles, even wealthy bakers, funded expeditions hoping for profit. They weren't businesses. They were lottery tickets that could disappear into the sea forever. Then, a group of Dutch merchants asked a question that would change the world. What if instead of gambling on a single voyage, we all invest in one company that funds all voyages? A simple idea, a revolutionary idea. In 1602, something happened for the first time in human history. People could buy shares, pieces of ownership, in a company. Large investors, small investors, anyone with money could join. But here's the twist. Their investment wasn't tied to one ship. They owned a fraction of the entire company. Even more revolutionary, they could sell their shares to someone else. This tiny idea created stock markets, shareholders, dividends, corporate governance, financial speculation. And like any invention involving money, it immediately got abused. The VOC grew into a monster. At its height, it controlled the spice trade across Asia, trade routes from Africa to Japan, dozens of colonies, its own private army, 40 warships, 10,000 soldiers, its own currency, the power to negotiate treaties. Not even the kings of Europe had this level of influence. And yet, this unimaginable power came from a simple financial invention, public investment through shares. But as the company grew, so did the greed. And that's when the trouble began. The VOC had one major problem. The voyages took years to return. Dividends were slow. Investors got impatient. So the board of directors did something very modern and very dangerous. They inflated their numbers. They exaggerated profits. They hid losses. They issued dividends not from earnings, but by borrowing money. Sound familiar? It's Enron. It's Lehman Brothers. It's every financial bubble in history. Except this was the first. The VOC wasn't just creating global trade. It was creating global financial temptation. And soon, the pressure to maintain wealth would push them into something darker. The VOC realized something. If you can't dominate the market, destroy the competition. So the company did what no company had ever done. It launched corporate wars. They seized islands, burned villages, executed rival traders, controlled spice-growing areas with brutal force. Their justification? If we don't do it, someone else will. They even conducted one of the first economic monopolies in history, controlling the supply of nutmeg so tightly that prices soared over 300%. The modern concept of market manipulation began with spices. Amsterdam exploded with wealth. Ships returned loaded with porcelain, silk, tea, spices, jewels. For the first time in history, middle-class people became rich. Merchants became as wealthy as nobles. Investors made fortunes without leaving home. This was the birth of the middle-class investor society. But success has a price. People began buying VOC shares not for dividends, but for speculation. The stock exchange became a casino. Wealth grew. Greed grew faster. And beneath the surface, the company began to rot. By the 1700s, the VOC was drowning in problems. Wars were expensive. Corruption was everywhere. Colonies were mismanaged. Pirates attacked their ships. Competition from Britain increased. Debt exploded. And the biggest threat? Bored, comfortable directors who preferred luxury over leadership. They spent money recklessly, issued dividends they couldn't afford, ignored shrinking profits. The VOC, the richest company ever created, had become a sinking ship. but investors kept buying shares anyway. Why? Because they believed a company this big can't fail. We hear the same thing today. In the late 1700s, the truth finally surfaced. The VOC was nearly bankrupt. Investors panicked. Share prices crashed. The Dutch government stepped in, nationalized the company, and in 1799, the VOC ceased to exist. After nearly 200 years, the world's first megacorporation died from the same disease that kills companies today. Too much debt, too much arrogance, too much greed, too little transparency. The company that invented capitalism was destroyed by it. Even though the VOC died, its ideas live everywhere. Stock markets, corporate boards, shareholders, dividends, employee contracts, auditors, global trade, investment speculation. The world today is simply a much more advanced VOC. But the greatest lesson isn't about wealth, it's about fragility. Every system of money humans create eventually collapses under its own weight, and every rise contains the seeds of its fall. The VOC teaches us a successful financial system must be balanced by discipline, transparency, and restraint, or it will eat itself alive. The Dutch East India Company didn't just change history, it created the rules of the financial game we still play today. The question is, have we learned anything, or are we just repeating the same cycle, waiting for the next giant to fall? If you think the VOC was fascinating, wait until you hear about the next story, because the next financial empire didn't just trade the world, it owned it.